Hello, everybody. We are going to start studying rhetoric this quarter, and we are going to start with a little bit of a review of diction. And if you remember from back earlier in the year, we talked about diction as simply being the words that a writer chooses. Diction means words, so you always want to have an adjective in front of it. And authors make choices about the diction that they use because the words have meanings other than just the dictionary or denotative meaning. They have connotation, they come with other meanings that have been added because of culture, because of society, and so language carries more weight than just the words itself. And so when you analyze a writer's diction, you want to be talking about it in terms of an adjective describing that diction. Because if you just say a writer uses diction, all you're effectively saying is that a writer uses words. So words have meaning, as we all know, and denotation is the literal dictionary definition of a word. So if you typed a word into Google and the dictionary came up, that dictionary definition would be the denotation of the word. But words often carry more meaning than that, as I mentioned previously. They have connotations as well. And the connotation is all the different shades of meaning and the associations and the feelings that are connected with a word. And they exist together along with that denotative or dictionary definition to create shades of meaning and nuance to the words. So if you think of a word like snake, a snake is an animal, or a reptile, sorry, not an animal, and it's just a word, but depending on your feelings about snake, it carries a different connotation. If you're somebody who loves snakes and reptiles and crawly things, you're going to have a different reaction to that word than someone who has a phobia about snakes. Thinking back to Of Mice and Men, a word like childish or childlike when we're describing a character like Lenny, they carry two different senses of meaning. Childish implies bad behavior in some way, where childlike highlights the innocence of that person's nature. And also in our society, when we talk about people as thin, skinny, slender, fat, obese, corpulent, any of those words, they all carry shades of meaning and often feel like they're carrying shades of judgment as well. And so when authors use words that make you stop and notice them, it's a good idea to think about what are the other meanings that come to you, or what are the feelings that you attach to that particular word. And one other brief thing about diction: when we talk about diction, or you're trying to identify the kind of diction that an author is using, you're not looking at groups of words or phrases or sentences. Diction really is about specific word choice. So you're looking at a word, at most a couple of words that work together to create that meaning. So if we think of diction and think of that in the context of a novel like To Kill a Mockingbird, we can look at some of the examples of Harper Lee's writing and attach meaning beyond the denotation to some of her examples. So if we think about diction and its use in establishing character, I have some examples on this page. She was all angles and bones. She was nearsighted. She squinted. Her hand was as wide as a bed slat and twice as hard. Angles and bones perhaps carries a connotative meaning for you. Perhaps wide and twice as hard for the hand has some connotative meaning for you. Aunt Alexandra was analogous to Mount Everest. Throughout my early life, she was cold and there. The word analogous sets our brain up to create a comparison, and that comparison that's created, that metaphor that Harper Lee creates through the specific words she uses, attaches additional meaning to our perception of Aunt Alexandra. Bob Ewell is described as a little bantam cock of a man who rose and strutted to the stand, the back of his neck reddening at the sound of his name. Mayella is described as stealthy, something stealthy about her, like a steady-eyed cat with a twitchy tail. And again here, depending on your feelings about cats, you will have a different response to that. And finally, the description of Tom Robinson that Harper Lee uses. Tom was a black velvet Negro, not shiny, but soft black velvet. The fact that Harper Lee uses the word velvet twice in this sentence means we're supposed to pay attention to it and think about the meaning that is created by that specific word that she's choosing. She doesn't say black shiny or black luminous. She uses the word velvet. And if you think of the feel of something velvet, that is what that description evokes for the reader. And that's the intent of authors using and worrying and changing and revising and finding the exact right word to create the meaning that they are intending. In addition to diction being used to help us understand character, we can also think about language and how it contributes to mood. And this passage comes from the end of the trial when they're waiting for the jury's decision. And Scout is narrating. She says, "But I must have been reasonably awake, or I would not have received the impression that was creeping into me. It was not unlike one I had last winter, and I shivered, though the night was hot. The feeling grew until the atmosphere in the courtroom was exactly the same as a cold February morning when the mockingbirds were still and the carpenters had stopped hammering on Miss Maudie's new house, and every wood door in the neighborhood was shut as tight as the doors of the Radley place. A deserted, empty, waiting street, and the courtroom was packed with people. A steaming summer night was no different from a winter morning." So the specific words that an author uses can contribute to that mood. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this passage, but just thinking about it, having listened to it, what are you hearing? What are you feeling because of the specific word choice that Harper Lee is making? So the last thing I want to talk about with the concept of diction is how it can pertain to tone and how it can contribute to tone. And if you think about tone as the author's attitude about a subject, or think of it as the author's or the speaker's tone of voice, that's a helpful way to look at tone. It can be tricky to detect if you don't have a good understanding of the story, of the characters, of the situation. And so all of that contributes to your understanding of tone. But when you think about analyzing a writer's tone or a speaker's tone, you want to think about how that tone conveys meaning. And if the words are written, how does that change the way that the speaker conveys meaning? And so, again, looking at some examples from To Kill a Mockingbird, I have a few examples on this page that, depending on how you speak them or hear them in your head, convey a very different meaning. So I want to just look at that second one that starts with "Then you are mighty polite." "Then you were mighty polite to do all that chopping and hauling for her, weren't you, boy? That was mighty generous of you. You had chores at home after your regular work, didn't you?" And that's Mr. Gilmer talking to Tom Robinson. And if we're thinking tone and diction together, the fact that he uses a derogatory word, a boy, to identify an adult man, that conveys a condescending tone of voice. And so that's what I mean by thinking about how language and how words can help determine tone. So we're going to look at a few more examples with this slide that are from Mayella, from Mr. Gilmer again, and then the first one is Atticus Finch talking. So just to summarize diction and the way that we're going to look at it through the context of To Kill a Mockingbird, as you're reading, you want to be thinking about the choices that Harper Lee is making with her word choice. What is she using as far as words to convey meaning, to enhance your understanding of something? This is a great thing to annotate as you read if you're stuck on, well, I know I'm supposed to mark up the text, but I'm not sure why. Looking for specific words that stick out to you is a great way to do that. And then the next step is identifying how they enhance our understanding of an aspect. Does it tell us something more about character? Does it set the mood? Does it show us what the tone is? All of those pieces are aspects of diction that will help you become a better and more critical reader.